December 16th, 1944, 5:30 a.m. The Schnee-Eifel Ridge, Belgian-German border. Obergrenadier Klaus Zimmermann adjusted his thin woolen greatcoat against the pre-dawn cold, watching through frozen binoculars as American positions materialized in the gray light. Around him, 200,000 German soldiers waited in the snow, teeth chattering, fingers numb, preparing for what Hitler called Wacht am Rhein, watch on the Rhine. "Look at them," whispered his squad leader, Feldwebel Ernst Koch, pointing at American sentries visible across the valley. Fat in their ridiculous quilted jackets, like pregnant women going to market. The laughter rippled through the German positions. American soldiers wore something the Wehrmacht had never seen: bulky, oversized winter combat uniforms that made them look comical. Padded jackets, insulated boots, layers that seemed excessive, unmilitary, soft. "The Americans dress like they're afraid of weather," Koch continued, his breath frosting the air. "We are soldiers, we endure. They are tourists playing at war." What Zimmermann and Koch didn't know, what none of the 200,000 freezing German soldiers preparing for the Battle of the Bulge understood, was that they were about to learn the difference between endurance and preparation, between toughness and stupidity, between dying for ideology and surviving through technology. Within 72 hours, American soldiers in their ridiculous winter gear would be fighting effectively in -20 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures, while German troops froze in their positions, unable to pull triggers with frostbitten fingers, unable to march on gangrenous feet, unable to fight because their bodies were shutting down from cold. The Germans had mocked American snow gear as evidence of weakness. They were about to discover it was evidence of something far more terrifying: an enemy that planned for survival while Germany planned for sacrifice. This is the story of how 77,000 German soldiers became cold-weather casualties in 6 weeks, how American winter equipment turned weather into a weapon, and how German mockery turned to desperation as they realized the Americans had militarized comfort itself. The German winter uniform of 1944 represented decades of military tradition and recent desperation. What Wehrmacht soldiers wore into the Ardennes was a combination of pre-war design and wartime scarcity that would prove catastrophic. The standard Feldgrau greatcoat, essentially unchanged since World War I, consisted of Feldgrau wool, single-breasted design, mid-calf lengths, no insulation beyond the wool itself, weighed approximately 5 pounds, and buttons that froze in extreme cold. Underneath, soldiers wore the standard field uniform: cotton/wool blend shirt, wool trousers with no wind protection, thin cotton underwear, wool socks, one pair if lucky, and standard leather marching boots with no insulation. For the Ardennes offensive, some units received additional winter equipment, but supplies were inconsistent. A few fortunate soldiers got rabbit for waistcoats, canvas overwhites for camouflage, wool scarves, personal purchase usually, and thin leather gloves with no insulation. Hauptmann Friedrich Vogel, commanding the 12th Volksgrenadier Division's Reconnaissance Battalion, had served on the Eastern Front. He understood cold. In his after-action report written from a POW camp, he recalled the pre-offensive briefings. "Our officers assured us the offensive would last 3 days, maybe 4. They said speed and violence would keep us warm. They said Americans collapsed quickly, that we would capture their supply depots with their winter equipment. They said German soldiers were tougher than weather. I had been in Russia. I knew better, but orders were orders." German military doctrine emphasized hardness. Soldiers were expected to endure conditions through willpower and discipline. The philosophy had roots in Prussian military tradition and had been weaponized by Nazi ideology into a cult of suffering. Cold weather training in the Wehrmacht consisted of standard marching exercises in winter, instruction to keep moving, orders to share body heat, and nothing resembling American cold weather doctrine. General der Panzertruppen Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding the 5th Panzer Army in the Ardennes, later wrote about German attitudes toward American winter gear. "Our intelligence officers showed us photographs of American soldiers in their padded uniforms. The jackets were enormous, quilted like bed covers. The boots looked like cartoon exaggerations. Our men laughed. These were not soldiers," they said. "These were children wrapped by worried mothers. We Germans would show them what real soldiers endured. This arrogance would kill thousands of our men in ways more horrible than American bullets." The mockery was systematic and confident. German soldiers had nicknames for American winter gear: Kuscheljacken, cuddle jackets, Muttersöhnchen uniform, Mama's boy uniform, and Fettpolsterung, fat padding. They saw American winter equipment as evidence of weakness, proof that Americans couldn't endure discomfort, confirmation that German toughness would prevail over American softness. What they didn't understand was that American winter gear represented something far more dangerous than softness. It represented industrial capitalism applied to soldier survival. It meant that while German ideology demanded soldiers suffer for the fatherland, American pragmatism ensured soldiers stayed combat effective regardless of weather. The Germans were about to fight not just American soldiers, but American logistics, American textile engineering, and American understanding that warm soldiers shoot straighter than frozen ones. What American soldiers wore into the Ardennes represented 3 years of intensive research, textile innovation, and a revolutionary understanding of cold weather warfare. The development began in 1941 when the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps realized existing winter uniforms were inadequate. They established research programs at universities, consulted Arctic explorers, studied Scandinavian military equipment, and tested designs in Alaska, Minnesota, and environmental chambers. The result was a layered system unprecedented in military history: the M1943 uniform system with winter modifications. The outer layer featured the M1943 field jacket, wind-resistant cotton sateen shell, button-in wool liner for insulation, pile collar for neck protection, drawstring waist to trap heat, and hidden button storm flap over zipper. Total insulation value 4 times the German greatcoat. For extreme cold, soldiers added the M1943 pile jacket, synthetic pile lining throughout, worn over the field jacket double-layer protection, and weight 3 pounds but warmer than 10 pounds of wool. The lower body was equally revolutionary. M1943. Field trousers with wool liner, wind-resistant outer layer, button-in insulation, and suspender system to eliminate belt pressure points that restricted circulation and caused frostbite. Underneath, the layering system included wool underwear, 2-piece, wool shirt, wool sweater when available, wool trousers, and 2 pairs of wool socks. But the real revolution was in the footwear. The American shoe-pack boot, rubber bottom bonded to leather upper, insulated with wool felt, rated to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, removable felt liner that could be dried, an oversized design to accommodate 2 pairs of socks without constricting circulation. German intelligence had acquired these boots in October 1944. Their analysis found in captured documents revealed complete misunderstanding. The American winter boot is oversized, heavy, and impractical for military maneuvers. Soldiers wearing such boots cannot march long distances or move quickly. The rubber construction will crack in extreme cold. The loose fit will cause blisters. Assessment: inferior to German military footwear. Every conclusion was wrong. The oversized design prevented circulation restriction, the primary cause of frostbite. The rubber-leather combination remained flexible to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. The loose fit with proper socks prevented the friction that caused blisters. American soldiers also received equipment German troops could only dream of: wool knit cap that fit under helmet, insulated mittens with trigger finger, wool scarf, insulated sleeping bag rated to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, and foot powder to prevent moisture buildup. The weight comparison told the story. German winter uniform, approximately 8 pounds total. American winter uniform with full cold weather gear, approximately 18 pounds. But the American soldiers stayed combat effective in temperatures that incapacitated German troops. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Garber, Quartermaster Corps, explained the philosophy in a 1945 training manual. The German military tradition emphasizes endurance through hardship. The American military tradition emphasizes elimination of unnecessary hardship. A soldier focused on not freezing is not focused on fighting. Our winter equipment frees the American soldier to concentrate on killing the enemy rather than surviving the weather. This is not weakness. This is combat efficiency. The cost difference was staggering. German winter uniform, approximately $12 per soldier in 1944 dollars. American winter uniform system, approximately $65 per soldier. The Germans couldn't afford the American approach even if they'd understood it. By December 1944, the U.S. Army had distributed winter gear to 80% of troops in the European theater. The system wasn't perfect. Soldiers complained the jackets were bulky, the boots were heavy, and the layers were complicated. But they were alive and combat effective. Staff Sergeant James Morrison of the 99th Infantry Division, which would bear the brunt of the German attack, later recalled, "We bitched about the winter gear constantly. The jackets made you look fat. The boots made you feel clumsy. You had so many layers you could barely move." Then December 16th came, and we spent 3 days in foxholes in sub-zero temperatures. The Germans attacking us were freezing to death in their positions. We were cold, but we could still shoot. That's when we stopped complaining. The American winter system had one other advantage German planners never considered. It was standardized and available. Every American soldier received the same equipment regardless of unit, location, or military branch. There were no shortages, no elite units getting priority, no soldiers freezing because logistics failed. This was American industrial war. Millions of winter uniforms manufactured in factories across America, shipped across the Atlantic in Liberty ships, distributed through supply networks the Germans couldn't disrupt, and available when soldiers needed them. The Germans were bringing 200,000 men into the coldest winter in 50 years, wearing uniforms designed for 1918 weather conditions. The Americans were waiting in uniforms designed specifically for 1944 Ardennes conditions. The weather was about to choose sides. December 16, 1944, 5:30 a.m. The German artillery barrage that opened the Battle of the Bulge was the largest on the Western Front since D-Day. For 2 hours, German guns pounded American positions. Then came the infantry, 200,000 men moving through snow and fog. The temperature was 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Within 48 hours, it would drop to minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. By December 20th, it would reach minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit in some sectors. Obergefreiter Hans Müller of the 12th Volksgrenadier Division later described the first day in his diary, recovered by American intelligence. 0600 hours. We advance. Already my fingers are numb. The greatcoat provides no warmth when moving through snow. Americans retreat but maintain fire. How can they shoot accurately in this cold? 1,200 hours. We have advanced 8 kilometers. 3 men in my squad cannot continue. Frostbite. Their boots are frozen solid. We leave them. 1,800 hours. Night comes. Temperature drops. We have no shelter. No fires allowed. Americans pulled back to prepared positions. They have fires. We can see smoke. We have nothing. The German offensive achieved tactical surprise and initial success. But within 24 hours, cold weather became an enemy more deadly than American resistance. At the battalion aid stations, German medical officers reported conditions they'd never seen on the Western Front. Frostbite cases appearing after 6 hours of exposure, trench foot developing overnight, and hypothermia incapacitating soldiers mid-advance. Stabsarzt, staff physician Wilhelm Brenner of the 18th Volksgrenadier Division recorded in his medical log, December 16th, 47 frostbite cases. December 17th, 134 frostbite cases, 23 hypothermia. December 18th, 312 frostbite cases, 67 hypothermia, 12 dead from exposure. We have no heated facilities, no dry clothes, no insulated boots. Men are taking boots from American prisoners. Our cold weather casualties exceed our combat casualties. Meanwhile, American units, though surprised and pushed back, maintained combat effectiveness despite the cold. The 99th Infantry Division, directly in the path of the 6th SS Panzer Army, held positions for 3 days in sub-zero temperatures. Private First Class Robert Jensen, 99th Infantry Division, recalled, "We were in foxholes with 2 feet of snow. Temperature was maybe 10 below, but we had the pile jackets, the shoe-pack boots, and wool everything. We were cold, absolutely, but we could function. We watched Germans attacking across open ground. They moved slowly like they were exhausted. Later we understood they were freezing. Some literally froze mid-attack. Found them the next morning solid as statues." The town of Krinkelt-Rochereth became a killing ground where American winter gear proved its worth. The 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions fought from prepared positions for 48 hours against repeated German assaults. Temperatures ranged from 5 degrees Fahrenheit to minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Captain Charles MacDonald, commanding Company Y, 23rd Infantry, 2nd Division, wrote in his memoir, "The Germans came at us in waves. By the second day, we noticed they were moving slower, their fire less accurate. Our men were cold but functional. Their men were freezing. We found German soldiers who had given up the attack not because we stopped them, but because they physically couldn't continue. Frostbite had taken their feet. Some were crying, not from fear but from pain and cold." By December 19th, the tactical situation had stabilized despite German advances. But the medical situation for German forces was catastrophic. Cold weather injuries were appearing at rates that shocked even Eastern Front veterans. General Major Otto Rehmer, commanding the Führerbegleiter Brigade, reported to Army Group B headquarters, "Combat effectiveness reduced 40%, not from casualties but from cold weather injuries. Soldiers cannot hold weapons with frostbitten hands, cannot march on frozen feet. We captured American supply dumps. Their winter equipment is vastly superior. Request permission to issue captured American uniforms to our troops." Permission was granted. German soldiers began stripping American casualties and prisoners of winter gear. Within days, German units presented a bizarre appearance: Feldgrau greatcoats mixed with American pile jackets, German helmets with American wool caps, Wehrmacht insignia on U.S. Army shoepack boots. This created its own problems. American soldiers began shooting at anyone wearing mixed uniforms, assuming they were German infiltrators. Some Germans were killed by their own troops who mistook them for Americans. The desperation for American winter gear became so acute that German commanders offered rewards. Extra rations for soldiers who acquired American boots, schnapps rations for American jackets, and weekend passes for complete American winter uniforms. Feldwebel Ernst Koch, who had mocked American winter gear on December 16th, wrote in a letter captured when he was taken prisoner, "I was wrong about the Americans. Their equipment is not soft, it is intelligent. My feet are black with frostbite. I will likely lose 3 toes. I cannot feel my fingers. I wear gloves taken from an American corpse. They work. Ours don't. We were told German soldiers don't need equipment, only will. Will doesn't stop frostbite. The Americans understood this. We didn't." At the battle's crucial point, the defense of Bastogne, American winter gear, became strategically decisive. The 101st Airborne Division, surrounded and cut off, held the town for a week in sub-zero temperatures. The Germans attacking Bastogne suffered 40% cold weather casualty rates. The Americans, adequately equipped for winter warfare, maintained 90% combat effectiveness despite being surrounded, outnumbered, and low on ammunition. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st, later stated, "The Germans asked us to surrender. We said nuts. Everyone focuses on that. But the real story is that we could say nuts and mean it because our soldiers were equipped to survive. If we'd had German winter uniforms, we'd have frozen into surrender. American winter gear kept us combat effective. That's what won Bastogne." By December 26, when Patton's Third Army broke through to Bastogne, the Battle of the Bulge had become a cold weather catastrophe for German forces. The statistics told a horror story. German cold weather casualties, December 16th to 31st, 1944, approximately 23,000 frostbite cases, 8,000 trench foot cases, 4,000 hypothermia hospitalizations, and 900 deaths directly from exposure. Total, 35,900 cold weather casualties in 2 weeks. This exceeded German combat casualties for the same period. American cold weather casualties, same period, approximately 3,000 frostbite cases, 800 trench foot cases, 400 hypothermia hospitalizations, and fewer than 50 deaths from exposure. Total, 4,250 cold weather casualties. The disparity wasn't just numerical, it was qualitative. American cold weather casualties were mostly minor cases who returned to duty. German cold weather casualties were catastrophic injuries requiring amputation and permanent disability. Oberfeldarzt Senior Medical Officer Heinrich Schultz, Chief Medical Officer for the 5th Panzer Army, compiled a report in January 1945 that was never distributed because it was too demoralizing. Captured copies survived. The cold weather injury crisis has destroyed the combat effectiveness of this army more thoroughly than enemy action. Soldiers are presenting with 4th-degree frostbite requiring immediate amputation. Trench foot cases show tissue death to the ankle. Hypothermia victims who survive show permanent organ damage. Our medical facilities are overwhelmed. We are amputating 200 feet daily. The men know this. They are more afraid of cold than combat. Morale is destroyed. The Americans win not through superior tactics, but superior equipment. This is not military defeat. This is industrial defeat. Individual stories from captured German soldiers revealed the human cost of inadequate winter gear. These accounts come from U.S. Army interrogation records. Gefreiter Otto Brandt, 26th Volksgrenadier Division. On December 22nd, my entire squad was combat ineffective from frostbite. Not wounded, just frozen. We couldn't pull triggers. Couldn't load magazines, couldn't walk. Americans advanced toward us. We couldn't retreat or fight. 5 of us were captured. 3 had their feet amputated. I lost 7 fingers. We fought in the same conditions as Americans. They stayed warm. We froze. The difference was equipment, not courage. The German military medical system, already strained, completely collapsed under the cold weather casualty load. Field hospitals designed for 500 patients received 3,000. Amputation rates exceeded surgical capacity. Frostbite victims waited days for treatment, by which time infection had set in. German commanders began making impossible choices. Continue the offensive and watch their armies disintegrate from cold weather casualties, or halt and surrender the initiative. General der Panzertruppen Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding the 5th Panzer Army, later wrote, "By December 28th, I informed Field Marshal Model that I could not continue offensive operations. Not because of American resistance, though that was significant, because my soldiers could no longer physically fight. The cold had defeated us more completely than the Americans. Entire companies reported unable to attack due to frostbite. This was a new kind of warfare where equipment determined survival and industrial capacity determined victory. The contrast with American forces was stunning to German prisoners. Unteroffizier Klaus Zimmermann, captured on December 30th, gave this account. We were brought to an American aid station. They had heated tents, warm coffee, dry socks. Their medics treated our frostbite before treating their own wounded. I asked an American soldier how they stayed warm. He showed me his uniform, the quilted jacket we had mocked, the huge boots we had laughed at, layer after layer of wool. He said the Army gave every soldier this equipment. Standard issue. We had been told Americans were soft. We learned they were smart. Softness is dying from cold. Intelligence is preventing it. German attempts to improvise winter equipment failed completely. Soldiers stuffed newspapers inside their greatcoats for insulation. It compressed and provided no warmth. They wrapped their feet in rags. It retained moisture and increased frostbite risk. They burned furniture for heat. It revealed their positions to American artillery. Nothing worked because the problem wasn't improvisation, it was systemic. Germany lacked the textile technology, the manufacturing capacity, and the logistics network to equip its armies for modern winter warfare. By January 1945, as the Ardennes offensive collapsed, German forces retreated, leaving behind evidence of the cold weather catastrophe. American intelligence officers found hundreds of German soldiers in field positions frozen to death, not from wounds but from exposure. Many had removed their boots trying to restore circulation, revealing feet blackened with frostbite. The psychological impact was devastating. German soldiers who had mocked American winter gear in December were begging for it in January. Entire units surrendered not from combat defeat, but from the knowledge that another day in the cold meant amputation or death. The Battle of the Bulge officially ended on January 25, 1945. The German offensive had failed, costing Germany approximately 100,000 casualties, 800 tanks, and the last mobile reserves that might have defended the Reich. But buried in those casualty figures was a number that revealed the true story. 77,000 cold weather casualties in 6 weeks. For perspective, that's more than the entire U.S. Marine Corps suffered in 4 years of Pacific Island warfare. The final cold weather casualty statistics were staggering. German forces. Total cold weather casualties, 77,000. Amputations performed, 15,000 plus. Permanent disabilities, 23,000 plus. Deaths from exposure, 2,400. Post-war analysis by U.S. Army historians concluded that German combat effectiveness in the Ardennes was reduced 40 to 60% by cold weather injuries, not combat action. The offensive that Hitler believed would split the Allied armies was defeated as much by American winter gear as American resistance. General Oberst Alfred Jodl, chief of the Wehrmacht operations staff, testified at Nuremberg about the Ardennes failure. We calculated American industrial capacity for weapons, vehicles, and aircraft. We failed to calculate their capacity for soldier care. Their winter equipment was superior to anything we fielded. This gave them a decisive advantage in winter operations. Our soldiers froze while theirs remained combat effective. This was not a factor we had considered. It should have been. The German soldiers who survived the Ardennes carried physical and psychological scars. Hospitals across Germany filled with amputees from frostbite. The medical term Ardennes syndrome emerged. Psychological trauma from extreme cold. Exposure combined with the knowledge that proper equipment could have prevented injury. Hans Müller, the Obergefreiter who had chronicled the first days, survived with the loss of 4 toes and 3 fingers. In a 1983 interview, he reflected, "We were taught that German soldiers were superior through discipline and hardness, that Americans were soft, dependent on material comforts. In the Ardennes, we learned the truth. Intelligence is not softness. Planning is not weakness. The Americans didn't ask their soldiers to be heroes. They gave them equipment to survive. We asked our soldiers to be martyrs. They froze." That's the difference between a free society and a fascist one. One values soldier survival, the other values soldier sacrifice. The lessons learned at the Ardennes revolutionized military cold weather doctrine worldwide. Post-war armies studied American winter equipment and adopted similar systems. The concept of layered insulation, oversized boots, and standardized cold weather gear became universal military practice. The U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, vindicated by Ardennes' performance, continued refining winter equipment. The M1943 system evolved into the M1951 system, which served through Korea and Vietnam. Modern military cold weather gear traces its lineage directly to the equipment that kept American soldiers combat effective in the Ardennes. But perhaps the most significant legacy was philosophical. The Ardennes proved that industrial capacity applied to soldier welfare was a combat multiplier, that keeping soldiers warm, dry, and comfortable wasn't soft, it was tactically intelligent. That armies that care for their soldiers fight better than armies that demand sacrifice. The Germans had mocked American snow gear as evidence of weakness. They learned it was evidence of strength. The strength of an industrial democracy that valued soldier survival, that planned for their welfare, that understood warm soldiers fight better than frozen martyrs. On December 16, 1944, German soldiers had laughed at American winter gear. They saw quilted jackets as evidence of softness, oversized boots as evidence of incompetence, layers of wool as evidence of weakness. By January 25, 1945, those same German soldiers were scavenging American winter gear from corpses, surrendering for the promise of warm American prisons, and returning to Germany with amputated limbs that would remind them forever of the difference between ideology and reality. The Battle of the Bulge demonstrated a fundamental truth of modern warfare. Armies that prepare their soldiers for conditions fight more effectively than armies that demand their soldiers endure conditions. American winter gear was not a luxury. It was a weapon. A weapon that kept 100,000 American soldiers combat effective in the coldest winter of the century, while 77,000 German soldiers became casualties of their own military tradition. The final word belongs to Feldwebel Ernst Koch, who had mocked American winter gear on the first morning of the offensive. Captured on January 3, 1945, missing 7 toes to frostbite, he gave this statement to American interrogators. "We laughed at your winter uniforms, called them soft, called you weak. We were fools. You didn't make soldiers suffer because you understood suffering doesn't win wars. We made soldiers suffer because we confused suffering with strength. I'm going home with half my feet gone. American soldiers I fought against are going home intact. Tell me who was stronger. Tell me who was smarter." The Americans won the Ardennes before the first shot was fired. They won it in textile factories and quartermaster depots. The German troops had mocked American snow gear. The mockery stopped when they started freezing. By then, it was too late. The Americans had militarized comfort itself and turned the coldest winter in half a century into a weapon that destroyed an army. The Ardennes snow fell equally on both sides, but only one side was prepared for it. That made all the difference.